At exactly 5:47 a.m. on June 14, the sun hadn't even cleared the grain silos yet, but Noah Blake was already swinging a shovel into the hardest ground in Finney County, Kansas. He wasn't planting. He wasn't harvesting. He was digging a grave. At least, that's what the men in the passing Ford F-250s thought as they slowed down on County Road 14. They'd rolled their windows down, the cold blast of their air conditioning hitting the hot morning dust, and yell things like, "Hey Blake, you planning on burying the whole drought? Or your dad know you're landscaping for gophers?" Noah didn't answer. He couldn't. His lungs were burning from the thin, dry air, and his hands, raw, blistered, wrapped in old duct tape, were gripping the hickory handle of a shovel that had belonged to his great-grandfather. The shovel was older than the state of Kansas itself, worn smooth in the middle from generations of palms. He was digging shallow trenches. Not for pipes. Not for fences. For water that hadn't fallen properly in 3 years. Behind him, a quarter-mile away, stood the Blake family farmhouse. A 2-story Victorian that had weathered the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, and 3 separate tornado warnings. But right now, it was weathering something worse: silence. His father, Dale Blake, sat on the porch steps. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't even watching. He was just staring at his own cracked boots. He had a yellow legal pad on his knee. On it, he had written the same number, circled and crossed out, 50 times, $14,700. That was the amount overdue to the co-op bank. Dale had stopped believing in miracles the day the irrigation pivot broke down 2 years ago and he couldn't afford to fix it. He had stopped believing in his son the day Noah started digging holes instead of looking for a job in town. But Noah had seen something his father hadn't. And that one, small, overlooked detail is what saves this story from being a tragedy. If you've never been to western Kansas in August, imagine standing inside a convection oven with the door slightly cracked. The heat doesn't just hit you, it wraps around your lungs. The sky is a violent, pale blue, so big it feels like it's pressing down on you. The soil here used to be the pride of the Midwest. 30 years ago, you could take a handful of this dirt, squeeze it, and it would hold its shape like Play-Doh, rich, black, and teeming with life. Now? It's dust. It's so fine and pale that when the wind picks up, it doesn't even look like dirt, it looks like smoke rising from the fields. Farmers call it the Kansas talc. It gets in your teeth. It coats the corn stalks until the leaves look like they've been spray-painted beige. The Blake farm is exactly 247 acres. It's bordered on the north by a dry creek bed that hasn't seen moving water since 2019, and on the south by a rusted barbed wire fence where tumbleweeds gather like refugees. Noah's mother, Sarah Blake, keeps a garden near the well. She waters it with a bucket, carrying it by hand because the hose doesn't reach. Her tomatoes grow small, hard, and bitter, like green marbles. But she never complains. She hums, usually some old hymn, while she kneels in the dirt. She is the quiet anchor of the family. When Noah walks past her, covered in dust and defeat, she doesn't ask him what he's doing. She just asks, "You drinking enough water?" It's her way of saying, "I trust you, even if I don't understand you." And then there is Nora Blake, Noah's grandmother. She is 83 years old, with a spine curved like a shepherd's crook from a lifetime of bending over rows of wheat. She sits on the porch swing every morning, wrapped in a quilt even though it's 95 degrees. She doesn't watch television. She watches the land. She watches the way the light hits the furrows, the way the ants move, the way the dust devils spin across the horizon. One evening, a week before Noah started digging, she called him over. She pointed a gnarled, arthritic finger toward the dry creek bed. "You see that seam, Noah? That dark line running along the bottom?" Noah squinted. He had looked at that creek 1,000 times, but he'd never noticed the dark, moisture-stained line of soil hiding under the overhang of the bank. "When I was a girl," Nora said, her voice like dry leaves rustling, "my father didn't have irrigation. He didn't have diesel fuel for pumps. He had a shovel and a strong back. He used to dig water pockets. Just shallow bowls. He'd line them with straw and grass clippings. The dew collected in them. The rainwater sank into them. He was building a bank, not for dollars, but for moisture." She looked at Noah, her pale blue eyes sharp as flint. "We forgot how to dig. We think we can buy water with diesel and chemicals. But the ground remembers. It's just waiting for someone humble enough to kneel down and listen." That night, Noah didn't sleep. He lay on his twin bed, the spring poking into his back, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of a river. He kept hearing his grandmother's voice, humble enough to kneel. He made the decision at 4:30 a.m. He was going to dig swales. Not big ones, not perfect ones. Just starting with a single 15-foot strip. Failure hit fast, and it hit hard. Noah started at the edge of the field, right where the dry creek bed curved. He dug a trench 18 inches deep, 2 feet wide, and 15 feet long. It was straight, clean, and looked like something you'd see in an irrigation textbook. He patted himself on the back. He even leaned on the shovel, sweating, and thought, "This is easy. Why hasn't anyone done this before?" He left it empty, waiting for the rain. 3 days later, a front rolled in. The wind picked up, throwing grit against the windows. The sky turned a sickly greenish yellow. And then the rain came, not a gentle drizzle, but a violent, horizontal downpour. Noah ran to the window, his heart pounding. Yes. This is it. But the rain was too fast. The water rushed down the slope of the field, slammed into his clean, straight trench, and instead of soaking in, it just sat there. The trench acted like a bathtub. Because he had smoothed the bottom, the water couldn't penetrate the hard pen underneath. It became a stagnant pond. The next morning, Noah ran out to check. The water was still there, murky and brown. Over the next week, it turned into a disgusting, scummy puddle. Mosquitoes hatched. The 2 sunflower seedlings he had planted at the ends of the trench rotted. Their stems turned black and limp. His father, Dale, walked past that morning. He didn't yell. He didn't mock. He just stopped, looked at the stagnant scum, and sighed, a deep, hollow sigh that seemed to empty the air out of his entire body. He walked on toward the barn, shaking his head. Noah heard the sigh. It was worse than 1,000 insults. That sigh said, "I raised a fool." But Nora, from the porch, just watched. She didn't say, "I told you so," she said, "The ground is giving you feedback, boy. It's telling you it can't breathe. Dig it again. This time, give it air." Failure number 2 was a study in overcorrection. Noah decided the problem was the smooth bottom. He filled the trench back in, but this time he dug it deeper, almost 3 feet down. He wanted to break through to the good stuff. He brought in old, half-rotted hay from the barn. He layered it at the bottom to help the water percolate. He worked for 3 straight afternoons. The sun was brutal, hitting 103 degrees. He took his shirt off, his back turning a painful red. He didn't care. This time, the rain came as a slow, steady soaker. Perfection. Noah went out the next morning, knelt down, and stuck his hand into the soil. It was damp. It worked. But a week later, the plants changed. The young soybean sprouts started turning a sickly yellow. Their tips curled up like claws. Noah didn't understand why. The soil felt wet. Why were they dying? He went to Nora, frustrated. "It's wet, Nana. Why is it killing them?" Nora hobbled down to the field, moving slow and careful. She picked up a handful of the wet soil and squeezed it. It didn't crumble. It turned into a sticky, gummy ball. She smelled it. "You hit the hard pan, Noah," she said. "You dug too deep. That clay down there is like a ceramic bowl. The water hits it and can't go any lower. So it just sits there, drowning the roots. You gave them a bath, but you didn't give them oxygen." Noah stared at the yellowing plants. He had worked for weeks. His hands were shredded. His back was screaming. And now he had to start again. That night, the neighbors got wind of it. The Petersons, who farmed 500 acres down the road, stopped by with a cooler of sodas just to check on Dale. They didn't mention Noah directly, but they joked loudly about the kid trying to dig to China. Dale just nodded, his face a mask of stone. He didn't defend his son. He couldn't. He had no energy left to defend anything. Noah was stubborn. But stubbornness without wisdom is just stupidity. For failure number 3, he found the exact sweet spot, 15 inches deep. He lined it with a thin layer of chopped corn stalks, the way his grandmother suggested, and mixed the topsoil back in so the roots had something loose to grow into. He angled the sides of the trench, so the water would trickle in slowly. He waited. The rain came. The water stayed. The plants didn't rot. He was so happy, he even smiled at his father across the dinner table. But June turned into July. The temperature climbed to 107 degrees. And it stayed there. For 2 weeks, there was no cloud in the sky. The sun was relentless, a white-hot laser that didn't relent from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. Noah went out to check his trench. The soil on top looked okay, but just 2 inches down, it was bone dry. The heat had wicked the moisture right out of the top layer. His young corn sprouts, which had looked so promising, stopped growing. They stayed knee-high, their edges turning brown and crisp like burnt toast. This was the breaking point. Noah threw the shovel, the heirloom shovel, onto the ground. The metal clanged against a rock, and the sound echoed across the empty field. He walked back to the house, grabbed a glass of water, and went to his room. He didn't come out for dinner. He told himself he was done. He told himself the neighbors were right. He told himself he was a fool. He cried. Not the dramatic crying you see in movies, but the quiet, exhausted crying of a 17-year-old who has given everything he has and gotten dust in return. He stayed in his room for 4 days. He came out only to use the bathroom and drink water. His mother left plates of food outside his door, and he let them sit there. On the morning of the 5th day, his mother knocked. "Noah," she said softly. "Come outside. Just for a minute. I need to show you something." He shuffled out in his torn jeans, too tired to even put on shoes. His mother led him to the failure zone, the very spot where he had thrown the shovel. She knelt down, and Noah saw it. The mycelium. In the shadow of the rock where the shovel had landed, under the dry, crispy corn leaves, a thin, white, web-like network of fungus was spreading through the soil. It was vibrant, alive, and, most importantly, underneath it, a single earthworm, fat and pink, was wriggling its way through the dirt. "You didn't fail," Sarah whispered. "You just made the soil too exposed. The sun stole the drink you gave it. But look here, in the shadow of your own tool, the soil is alive. It just needs shade. It needs a blanket." Noah looked at his hands. Then he looked at the field. He realized he had been fighting the wrong enemy. He wasn't fighting the drought, he was fighting the evaporation. He remembered a detail his grandmother had mentioned: the old farmers used flat stones and straw to keep the dew from floating away. He went back to the drawing board, but this time, he didn't just dig. He layered. He dug wide, gently sloping basins, shallow bowls, not deep pits. He lined the bottom with a thick layer of dry grass and shredded cardboard which he found in the barn. He put the dirt back. Then, most crucially, he didn't smooth the top. He left it rough, clumpy, and messy. And over the clumps, he placed flat, cracked limestone pieces he found along the old creek bed. Not a wall, but a scattered blanket. The stones absorbed the heat of the sun, but they blocked the wind. At night, the stones cooled and released condensation back into the dirt. The rough surface grabbed the dew out of the air and pulled it downward. It was a moisture battery. A living, breathing, natural battery. It took 3 weeks, but the change was undeniable. Where the rough basins were, the soil stayed cool to the touch even at 2 in the afternoon. The earthworms multiplied. Small, delicate green shoots pushed up through the gaps between the stones, thicker and darker than any crop on the farm. Then came the unexpected visitor, Dr. Harold Finch, a retired soil scientist from the Kansas State University Extension Office. He had heard the rumors in town, the jokes about the Blake boy digging graves. But scientists are curious creatures. He drove his dusty white pickup out to the Blake farm on a Tuesday afternoon. He didn't say a word to Dale or Sarah. He just walked straight into the field and dropped to his knees. He spent 20 minutes just staring at the soil, scratching at it, smelling it, watching the water beat on the limestone. Finally, he stood up, brushed off his khakis, and looked at Noah. "Son," he said, "do you have any idea what you've done here?" Noah shook his head, nervous. "You've performed a complete topographical reset," Dr. Finch said. "By breaking the capillary action on the surface, you've stopped the wicking effect. The water that falls here stays here. The organic matter you buried is feeding the fungi, which is feeding the plants. Do you know how many millions of dollars in research are being poured into exactly what you did with a $15 shovel? This isn't luck, kid. This is applied physics." Dale overheard this. He had been standing a few yards away, pretending to fix a broken fence post. But he stopped pretending. He walked over, slowly, his work boots heavy in the dust. "Dr. Finch," Dale said, his voice cracking. "Is it real? Can we actually harvest this?" "Harvest?" Finch laughed. "Dale, if he does this to the rest of your 247 acres, your harvest won't be just good. You'll be the only green field in the county. The bank won't be sending you letters. They'll be sending you congratulations." Something broke inside Dale Blake that day. It wasn't a bad break, it was the breaking of a dam. He walked back to the house without a word. An hour later, he came back out with a brand new shovel he had bought at the co-op a year ago and never used. He didn't look at Noah. He just drove the shovel into the ground right next to his son. They worked side by side for 6 weeks. Every evening, from 6 p.m. to dusk, father and son dug. They laid down grass clippings, cardboard, and the flat limestone they hauled from the northern fence line. Neighbors drove by, but this time, they didn't laugh. They slowed down to watch, to learn. One evening, a miracle occurred. A summer storm rolled in from Colorado. It dumped 2 inches of rain in an hour. Dale stood on the porch, watching the water race off his neighbor's field like a brown river heading straight for the culvert. But when he looked at his own basins, the water didn't race. It swirled, settled, and vanished into the mulch, disappearing into the ground. The next morning, Dale walked out to the field and put his hand in the dirt. It was cold. It was damp. It was alive. By late September, the harvest came. The Blake farm produced corn with stalks 10 feet tall. The ears were full, heavy, and golden. The soybeans popped with fat, green pods. The yield was 32 bushels per acre, higher than the county average. The Petersons came knocking. The Hendersons came asking. Mr. Peterson, the same man who joked about digging to China, showed up with his hat in his hands. "Dale," he said. "Noah. We saw it, the green strip. How do you do the layering?" Noah did the most powerful thing he could do. He didn't make a speech. He didn't bring up the jokes. He simply handed Mr. Peterson a small handful of the cool, dark soil from his pocket. "Here," Noah said. "Feel it. Then bring your shovel over tomorrow." By the time the first frost hit, over 100 acres across Finney County had been Noahized. The farmers had started calling the technique Blake trenching. But for Noah, it wasn't about the name. It was about the morning of November 15th. He was out by the fence line, looking at the stubble of the harvested field. The sun was setting, casting that famous golden Kansas light over the land. Nora Blake hobbled up behind him, leaning on her cane. She looked out at the sea of dark, healthy soil. "You did it, boy," she said. "No, Nana," Noah said. "You told me the ground was screaming. I just finally listened." She reached up and touched his cheek with her rough, papery hand. "That's all it ever needs, Noah. Just someone to listen. The world will shout at you with its truck horns and its bank letters and its hot winds. But the ground? It whispers. You have to be still enough to hear it." Noah looked back at his father, who was walking toward them, patting the dust off his jeans. Dale wasn't hollow anymore. He was heavy with the weight of a good harvest, but it was a good weight. He finally had hope. What Noah planted that summer wasn't just corn or soybeans. He planted proof that the solution to our biggest problems isn't usually in a bottle, a loan, or a shortcut. It's buried right under our feet, overlooked, dismissed, and laughed at. It takes a humble heart and a strong back to find it. I want to ask you the same question Nora asked Noah: where is the dry soil in your life right now? Are you trying to force a solution with noise and stress, or are you listening for the whisper? If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that hard work and patience still matter, share it with someone who's going through their own Kansas drought. And tell me in the comments below, what is the stone you need to place in your life to hold the moisture? I reply to every single one.